Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Basu and Godin Notebook. This is the episode of October 27th. Arpin, how you doing today?
Good. I'm still getting used to Basu and Godin Notebook. I keep thinking you're going to say, welcome to the Athletic Support. I'm your host. But
I know,
still,
I have to remind myself.
Yeah. So we're on a good, So listen, a lot to get to this week. So why don't we just jump right in? Obviously, the big news since our last episode is that, David Savard is going to be out for up to 2 months, maybe sooner than that. I happened to see him at the Bell Center Thursday night, last night, and he had a cast on his hand, but no surgery required.
Yeah.
But still, there's
been moving parts since then.
There's a lot of moving parts because I don't think there's any clear answers to how the Canadians lose this guy. And who knew David Savard was so important? Maybe David Savard did. I think the Canadians did too, but I think a lot of the fans didn't realize it, and I think a lot of the media, frankly, don't realize how kind of pivotal he is to how the whole defense is kind of shaped. Yeah. But
especially for what he brings in terms of his very special set of skills.
Yes.
Defensively, the PK, the shot blocking ability, things like that. So there's also, a committee that's been
Well, it bears mentioning that, with Columbus in town on Thursday, a lot of their media obviously was there, and just how all of them were concerned about David Savard. Like he really left a mark in Columbus. I think a lot of the people in Columbus, the fans, the media, A, were concerned, but B, were kind of like, that's David Savard for you, out there, actually being featured on the Pat McAfee show. For his shot blocking shift, that shift of the year at the end of the Buffalo game, taking nice. A Tage Thompson shot off the hand, breaking his hand, staying out there, blocking more shots, losing his skate blade. Everything was part of what Pat McAfee does, this Hockey is Awesome segment on his show, and then he was part of it. So good for him. But that is the skill set you're referring to.
Absolutely. So today we're going to look at the committee that's being established to share the responsibilities, share the load while he's out, what it means for the different defensemen, mainly the younger ones. We've got, for all intents and purposes, I think that we can say that Guhle is going to be back for Saturday's game. Hasn't been confirmed, but it is to be expected. But already with Savard, we've seen how things changed mainly for Justin Barron, and to a certain extent to Jonathan Kovacevic. So let's. We later on in the show we're going to discuss retaliation to dangerous hits. We've got our Prospect Friday. That's going to be our regular segment for the end of the week, and we'll finish off by talking a little bit about Brendan Gallagher and how he's bounced back after a sort of worrisome training camp and worrisome start to this season. But first, let me. I know that you wrote about Jonathan Kovacevic, so let's use this as a starting point. He was seeing Pascal Vincent, his former coach with the Manitoba Moose, last night at the Bell Center. Pascal Vincent, now the head coach of the Columbus Blue Jackets, and he's a guy who's really going to be looked upon to fill David Savard's shoes in terms of defensive responsibilities. We've seen his minutes go up, and in the third period, Martin St. Louis switched Justin Barron and him alongside Mike Matheson. So we saw through the third period Kovacevic being paired with Matheson, top duo, top pairing for the Canadians. What did you make of this?
Well, I guess I'll share a little bit of how the day went. Just because I don't know if you caught Martin St. Louis' answer to the question on why he did that. So he's not someone who's known for his brevity, except when he doesn't want to talk about something. So after the game, he didn't want to address why no specific reason is what he said as to why he switched Jonathan Kovacevic or swapped Jonathan Kovacevic and Justin Barron and had them both. Justin Barron, I think in particular, really benefited from having easier matchups and really had a great third period, I thought. But the backstory to that, for anyone else who kind of saw Martin St. Louis sort of avoid that question, is on Thursday morning, I had asked him about whoever plays with Mike Matheson is naturally going to play a lot. They're going to play against the opposing team's top lines. They're gonna get lots of minutes 5-on-5. They might, they're not going to get the same minutes as Matheson because Matheson's on the penalty kill and the power play. But at even strength, you're going to play a lot, and that's what Justin Barron was kind of thrust into. So to go from being a healthy scratch for the first 3 games to a few games later being on the top pair is quite a jump, and I think he was having a bit of trouble handling it. So, Thursday morning, Martin was like, well, yes, they're going to face a lot of opposition, but that's added responsibility, and we're watching Justin Barron play. We're going to let that dictate what we do with him and whatever. And so a perfectly fine answer. But then after the game, when he actually did have to switch him, he wasn't all that chatty about it. So I think he I think he didn't want to acknowledge that listen, I don't know what he was actually thinking, but I think he would have had to acknowledge that he kind of maybe gave Justin Barron a bit too much too soon, and that he realized that during the game, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, and I was able to infer it myself in my story. Didn't need his answer to really fill that out, but I think it's just a great opportunity for Jonathan Kovacevic. Listen, we talked about him in a previous episode, and just his emergence as a guy. He speaking to him prior to the game, something he said that actually no, this was actually earlier this week was he felt like a lot of things in his game will get unlocked with increased comfort. And you look at his AHL numbers in his first 2 years in the AHL, he was coached by Pascal Vincent and put up fine numbers, but Pascal was really had some nice things to say about him before the game, how smart he thought he was, how he was really considered him to be a good prospect for the Jets. And it turned out that he winds up getting that opportunity here. He was happy for him. He called him a good man, and which is not, honestly, you don't hear that in hockey. That you hear that about like management types and agents and all sorts, but a coach calling a player a good man. But I think I think you'd agree it really fits with Jonathan Kovacevic.
Totally.
He's a very, very good man, and so, but it's just his preparedness for this. And as I wrote in my story, the one thing Pascal Vincent told Kovacevic while he was in the AHL is be over ready, be over prepared, be ready for when the opportunity comes. So. The first year Pascal Vincent had left to take the Columbus job, which was Kovacevic's 3rd season in the AHL. He put up 11 goals, 30 points in 62 games. Became a half point a game defenseman. Showed some offensive upside, but that he felt was due to his level of comfort. Now he's entering his 2nd season in the NHL. I think that comfort level is coming for him. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. I don't know even if on Saturday he's going to be playing with Matheson, but he seems like someone, and Nick Suzuki said it, that he looks like a guy who's ready to be a top 4 defenseman in the NHL.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure. He never said that about Brett Kulak, I don't think. But he said, I'm sure, saying that about Jonathan Kovacevic. And it was really sincere. He said how his poise has improved from last season, hanging on to pucks to make plays, just little details of the game. But he's been quite impressed. And I think all his teammates have been really impressed by this guy. So let's see if this opportunity that we saw a glimpse of in the 3rd period actually becomes a thing to help deal with the loss of this unique player that they lost in David Savard.
Yeah, well, his style of play complements Matheson, whereas Barron and Matheson, I thought that it was a bit always more of the same. They're built a little bit similarly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it was redundant. So if you just want guys who will complement each other, that it would make more sense. But I want to come back to the brevity of St. Louis' answer regarding changing those pairings in the 3rd period. I think that management has identified, not just St. Louis, but all of the Montreal Canadiens brass, have identified that they want to build up Justin Barron. They want to bring him and make sure that they develop him properly. But they've acknowledged the fact that mentally he needs to be protected and he cannot be thrown under the bus. So there's already been a few opportunities so far this season, since either during training camp, where he seriously had his ups and downs, and since he came back and started playing in the regular season. St. Louis had opportunities to, to made a negative remark or two about
To
him.
say what he said about Suzuki.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Without finger pointing, being too harsh,
Yeah,
just telling it
just
like it is. But he
being honest the
always,
way he said he
that's
doesn't want to
right.
lie. Yeah.
That's
Let's be
right.
honest.
But
I don't think
with
he
Baron,
was all that honest with that answer last night though.
no, but I mean, that's okay. He chose not to lie. He'd rather
Oh
say
yeah.
nothing than choosing to lie.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But I think that in the case of Baron, it's like if he was to say, you know what, I thought that he struggled, that it was too much, so a chance was needed, he would have thrown his young defenseman under the bus. And particularly when it comes to Baron, this is something that they want to avoid. When they
Mm-hmm.
pondered, do we send him down to Laval or do we keep him? Do we keep Norlander and send Baron down to Laval? It's not just, well, is Norlander ready for the task? It's also, well, how would it affect Baron's psyche? Aren't we better off keeping him in Montreal, make him feel like he's part of the team, build him up, and over time, like work on his deficiencies and just help him becoming a better player. So I think that goes into the development mindset
Yeah.
that Martin Saint Louis has, not only psychologically, but in terms also of strategic development, in the responsibilities also that are given. That's another thing that I know you asked Martin Saint Louis about regarding Baron and regarding Arbor Jacki, was their role on the second unit of the PP. People will say, it's weird because Baron is a guy who's offensively minded. He's very mobile, can walk the blue line on the PP. He's got a decent shot.
It has a quick shot. A
Yeah.
quick shot that he gets through. Yeah.
So he seems to be fit for second PP duties. And you look at Jacki, you would perceive him more of as defensive defenseman. So why isn't it that Jacki plays on the PK and Baron plays on the PP? But what we've seen is the other way around. And you had a theory on that, and I think that it goes along the way of Saint Louis being focused on development.
It's absolutely the same thing. I spoke to both of them actually before the game on Thursday, Jacki and Baron, on this. And well, neither of them wanted to say, yeah, I'd rather be on the other special teams. They basically said that. I mean, Baron was kind of like, Baron's never killed penalties at the NHL level. He's done it at every level moving up. Like he played in junior, American Hockey League. Prior to that, he's been a penalty killer before, just not in the NHL. Jacki has never played on the power play on a consistent basis. Even in junior, when he did play, on the rare occasions he played on the power play, he was a one-timer option in the right circle. He was never the quarterback of the power plays. So this is the first time he's done that. And I was just kind of, to both of them, was like, don't you feel like you would really firm up a role that's yours if you were doing the other guy's job, not, and ask them separately. And Baron was kind of like, yeah, I think, probably makes more sense to have me on the power play. And Jacko was like, yeah, it probably makes more sense to have me on the penalty kill. Like, they didn't deny it, but they're happy to be getting the opportunity. And when I asked Marty about it before the game, he said that for Baron, I'm paraphrasing here, but for Baron to become a regular player in the NHL, this is an area of the game that he has to shore up, and he's taken strides in his defensive game. He's happy to see how he's improved defensively since he came to Montreal, and this is just another way to get him to make those improvements. So he wants him to have a defensive role on the team, even though he's always been an offensive guy. And he didn't flat out say it, but that's clearly a case of making an NHL personnel decision based more on development than what will help you right now.
Yeah.
You see Baron shooting the puck. He gets it off really quickly. He's got a deceptive shot. He's, the 2 goals he scored, I joked with him, what kind of voodoo are you using to have these long rebounds land directly on your stick? And he laughed. But, it's not everyone that would have been able to just snap those pucks home. Like, he did it both times, one-timer, didn't settle the puck down. Like, he has a skill set that would be useful on power play too. It's not as if the second power play unit is humming along. Even though the overall power play has scored now in 4 straight games, believe it or not, and scored twice for the first time this season against Columbus. But still, it's interesting that, oftentimes coaches will be like, let's put a player in the best position to succeed, right? And they'll do all sorts of things. Uri Slafkovsky is going to play in the top six, and I don't care how bad he plays, he's staying in the top six, and he's going to have a top six role because we want him to succeed, and that's the best way to make him succeed. This is almost the opposite. This is almost like, let's put guys in a position where they're uncomfortable and force them to improve, which I think is commendable in the Canadian situation. Like it's an interesting decision, an interesting explanation for it. And ultimately, I think a positive for the Canadians because it's true. They do come out on the winning end if Justin Barron ultimately becomes a better defensive player or ultimately becomes someone who becomes good on the penalty kill. Because let's be honest, right now that's not the case. He's not been very good on the penalty kill. Xhekaj's not been very good on the power play. He even admitted the previous game on Tuesday how he had messed up a breakout. How everyone else had, it's actually, I don't know if you knew this. I found it interesting is that, so when the second power play unit is on the bench, they will come up with a breakout to use coming off the bench because usually they're changing on the fly, right? They usually change after the other team clears the puck down the ice. So they will come up with a breakout that they're going to use on their first shift because basically when they get on the ice, there's usually maybe 20, 30, tops 40 seconds left in the power play. They don't have time to waste. And in the game against Minnesota on Tuesday, they had agreed on one, and Xhekaj, for whatever reason, thought it was a different one and messed it up. And he was like, "That was on me. Everyone else did the right thing. I didn't." So he's still getting used to. He's never played that position before. So you have two guys who have never done the jobs they're doing right now in the NHL, and they're being force-fed these jobs just so that they can get better at them. And that's really. It's a smart decision. I feel it's not as if the Canadians are desperate to win. Well, so might as well do this.
Yeah. Well, watching Xhekaj practice sometimes by himself ahead of practice on his movement at the blue line, on his shot, etc. It reminds me a little bit of seeing Scott Hatterberg's character in Moneyball learning how to play first base.
That's right. Yes, that's
picking machine.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's it. Dave Justice,
that's it.
Pumping him up. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so it's a little bit like that. But things might change. We're discussing this might become a moot point by tomorrow. With if Caden Guhle comes back, you would think that Caden Guhle is going to take his spot back on the PK. Which, in this case, could if Martin St. Louis really wants to give Justin Barron some minutes, then he could put him on the power play. But that being said, I think that
I'm not even sure that Justin Barron would be the one to come out of the PK if Guhle goes back because Xhekaj has been getting minutes.
Yeah.
So you got Kovacevic, you got Matheson, you got Guhle. Yeah. There's one more guy that has to play on the PK. I think it might wind up being Barron. It's possible. It's either that or playing because I think he's ahead of Xhekaj in the PK order. Like they don't want Xhekaj playing both special teams. They really.
I know. But what I'm saying is that they could make. Yeah, you're right.
Harris would be the other option, which might wind up being the case.
Mm-hmm.
But
this decision goes to show how the year is still firmly based on development and not results. And when I listen to Martin St. Louis, sometimes his decisions or the way that he'll talk about his players, after the game yesterday, he said, "Yeah, I might have raised my voice in between the first and second period, and I might have used a bullet, but there's just so many bullets that a coach has, and you have to pick your spots in order to use them." And he's a guy who's been keeping a very positive approach for the most part because he's been protecting his players. And last week, he told the media, he said, you guys don't ask me a lot about our 5-on-5 play, which is fine. And you criticize the power play, which is not doing so good. And I find that the coverage is negative. I think that it's fine that the media is just doing their job, and it's not nitpicking for the fun of nitpicking, but at some point you cannot be compliant and complacent every day. But I think that it's just Martin St. Louis in his head. He doesn't want to be put in positions where he's going to have to say bad things when he doesn't plan on doing that because he's not ready, because it's not the right time for it. So when it's not in his control and he's being put in that position by the media, it makes it uncomfortable, because in his plan, there's, I was saying that on the Tenma Hockey, the other podcast that I'm participating in. I feel like he seems to be in that mentality where he's going to say 4 positive things for 1 negative, and not the
to
other
balance
way.
out to balance out the dictionary. Yes.
Yeah. So in that sense, I think that all that, whether it's the decisions on the ice or the way that he talks about his players, it really proves how much he takes this season as a developmental year, a lot more than a results-based year.
They're also 4-2-1 after 7 games. They're
yes,
a point
the results
back,
are there.
Back
the results are there.
Yeah. So I think I could but going back to when Marty was talking about, there's 4 negative words in the dictionary to every 1 positive word, a reference I could not find any evidence of, but he insists that's the case. So I'll take him on his word. But that was a unique situation where there was a lot of time between games. The game prior, they had taken a lot of penalties. The penalty kill wasn't very good. The power play wasn't very good. There was like 2-3 days to talk about it. So, but they are getting results, but they're not letting those impact the personnel decisions that they're making, which in this case, I think it's easy to assume that Guhle's coming back as the veteran presence, but he's his second year in the NHL. He's not exactly. He's someone that they need to develop as well. So when he does come back, which I think is all but assured will happen on Saturday, it's an interesting kind of situation on defense, because you have, let's say for a minute that they keep Kovacevic with Matheson.
Yeah.
Which I think they should. Then you have Guhle on the second pair. You have the option of putting Barron with him, which would be a good fit stylistically, as not redundant, as we were talking about earlier. Or you would have the option of moving Jordan Harris to the right side and playing him with Guhle, and then having Jack-Kai Barron on the third pair, which is probably a better spot for Barron to be playing. Of those 2 options, and keeping in mind everything you said about how they're trying to manage Barron, how they're trying to manage his psyche, his morale, everything, what do you think is the better of the 2 options? Taking for granted that Gustav Lindstrom will not be in the picture.
Of course. Yeah.
Yes.
I would go with Guhle and Harris on the second pairing, and put Jack-Kai and Barron together, because if they're unsure of the consistency of Barron's play from one shift to another, it's better to manage his minutes, shelter him a bit, and not put too much responsibility, because it's one thing to be playing with Mike Matheson, who's a very experienced guy, and it's another thing to ask a second-year player like Guhle to say, you know what, at the same time, keep an eye on your partner, make sure that you cover his ass if anything happens. So you don't have to worry about that if the third pairing is playing 15 minutes a night. So, and you can, I think that the fact that he's in the lineup, the fact that you'll give him time on the special teams, it should be good enough. The fact that I don't think that Barron's in any position to say, well, how come I'm not playing top 4 minutes? I think things will change very quickly. I think that there's no definite duos on defense that are really set in stone for the foreseeable future. But just to ease Guhle back in, I think that Harris, even though he would be playing on his offside, would probably be a more stable partner for Guhle, at least at the beginning.
No. Yeah, I agree. I mean, the only reason they wouldn't do that is if they look at it. Well, basically, if they prioritize Barron's development over Harris's, really, because again, Jordan Harris is also a young player. They have a lot of young players on defense, and so it would benefit Jordan Harris much like it benefits Barron to shore up his defensive game, learn how to kill penalties. It would benefit Harris to learn how to play on the right side, or he already knows how to play on the right side, but to get more reps playing on the right side and showing that that's something that's an option that's available to the Canadians with him, because as we've mentioned in the past, he's on. It's hard to see. It's hard to see his niche on this team. He's a good player, smart player. Doesn't really excel at any one thing. Doesn't have a dimension, as I think you mentioned in the past. So, for him, showing that he can be an option on the right side would be another ace up his sleeve, if you will. Just like penalty killing duty and power play duty is that for Barron and Jacky. But I also just think he would just be a better fit, and it would be a better thing for Barron. Because if both Barron and Jacky are playing on special teams, then they'll get their extra minutes there.
That's it.
And so having them on a third pair together would make a lot of sense.
And Guhle and Harris are two guys that can jump in the rush occasionally, be that fourth guy in, but it was not necessarily going to be always the same. It could be one guy in a certain situation, the other in the other, and it would still be balanced. But I think that even though it's hard to find a definite spot for Harris, I think that the more that he joins the offense, uses his mobility, his plus skating to open some room, open some ice, and really, join the rush. I think the more he does that, the more value he'll add to his play, because it's not necessarily through the special teams that he's going to prove his worth. It's really by how much of a threat he can be by stretching his play over 200 feet.
Yeah,
but 5-on-5.
Yeah, and so it's it bears mentioning. You mentioned Martin St. Louis talking about how the media were all negative on the power play, not so long ago. Well, the power play has scored in 4 straight games, scored twice against Columbus, but really were deprived of 2 opportunities. And wanted to talk about this a little bit just because it was annoying to me, and I think it was annoying to you as well. But, the officiating crew for the Columbus game taking the hit from behind, 2 consecutive hits from behind in short order, really close to each other, and having both of them even out penalty-wise because the Canadians retaliated. One was Arbor Jacky getting a fighting major and a roughing minor, which was really n'importe quoi, which is really I don't want to give you an instigator. I feel you instigated the fight, but I don't think you don't deserve an instigator because the fight was kind of justified. The guy hit you from behind.
Of course.
I still don't like that you started the fight, so I'm going to give you a roughing penalty on top of your fighting major, as if that's not then every fighting major should come with a roughing penalty because by its very nature, you're roughing when you're fighting.
Give him the next instigator in 10 minutes while you're at it,
Well, clearly the official didn't want to do that, and I think that was an admission that if you're going to have fighting in the game, then that's the period. That's what it's for.
Yeah,
it's to fight a guy who just hit you from behind illegally and show him that there's consequences to doing that, so he doesn't do it again. That's really when everyone says fighting is the thermometer for the game. That's what it's a deterrent. It's supposed to be a deterrent. So if you're going to allow fighting, then you can't tack on an extra minor, and you can't have that even up. And so what happens a few minutes later? Because the Columbus Blue Jackets paid no consequences for that hit from behind, they go and hit another guy from behind. And again, Tanner Pearson jumps in to defend Alex Newhook and winds up getting tagged with a roughing minor. And it's just what are you guys doing? What is the egregious offense here? And it was such an easy solution. So the first one, no roughing minor on Jacky, fighting majors, hit from behind. On the second one, if you want to give Pearson a roughing minor, then tack on a roughing minor to the other guy, which they do all the time. Even if a guy is not instigating or is not doing anything to provoke a roughing penalty, if he's involved in a tussle or anything after the whistle, all the time they'll send both guys off, even if it's just one guy who's really the aggressor, So it just bugged the hell out of me the way they handled that. I mean, these are NHL officials. They should know how to maintain the temperature of a game. And they're really lucky that game didn't get away from them because it could have.
Yeah. So I was not at the Bell Center for the game yesterday. And so I listened to it on RDS. And after the game, the guys were saying the Canadians lacked discipline because they had two power play opportunities offered to them, and they screwed it up by retaliating. But it's weird because
Who said that? But who said that on RDS? Was it a former player?
yeah.
Oh yeah.
So yeah,
That strikes me as odd because
it's
that
it,
strikes me
it,
as odd.
I
That's not
know.
a player's mentality usually. I mean, it's pretty rare that you hear a player say something like that.
Well, listen, I find that this is strange to me because you have let's remember that not too long ago, I think it was 2 years ago, Samuel Montembeau was hit by Zach Cassian, and
Yes.
Jeff Petrie skated rather gingerly towards
Yes.
towards Cassian.
Yeah.
Didn't do anything. Ryan Paling did the same, and there was an uproar among the fan base saying, "How come they did not go out and defend their teammate who had
Yeah.
just been hit?"
It's funny they got traded together.
I know.
That just dawned on me that they were linked with that incident. Yeah.
Exactly. And now this time it's the reverse that's happening. You have dangerous hits because I think that both boarding hits were potentially the cause of an injury. They're dangerous plays and they should not be accepted. And the reason why it's only a 2-minute penalty really eludes me, because you choose to punish the retaliation and say, dude, you should have kept your cool and not retaliate. You choose to penalize the guy for that. Okay, fine. But in the balance, a retaliation or roughing minor should not have the same weight as a boarding hit that was a threat to injure the opponent. Right. So give 4 at one place and 2 at the other. But I was talking
Columbus has to wind up with a penalty to kill.
For sure. Because none of that happens if there's no hit from behind in the first place. Yeah. And I was talking about that with Jordan Harris today, because in second period, Voronkov had a hit to Harris's head. And again, it was only a 2-minute minor with also a risk of injury there. I mean, by that time, it's the second time around that this guy has been out trying to injure Canadiens players, and all he gets is he gave the Canadiens a 2-minute power play through that whole ordeal. So I asked Harris, I said, well, if you have to draw the line between team toughness, showing solidarity, and go out to defend your teammate, versus having to keeping your cool and get the power play. So how do you manage? How do you balance both? And he says, well, we're a team that has to send a message that you go after one of us, you're going after all of us. He says, yes, there will be situations where you have to keep your cool, probably later in the game, where he said, well, considering the score, considering where we are in the game, we need that power play. But most of the time, you have to prioritize the team toughness and the solidarity. And I'm 100% agreeing on that. So it's not a lack of discipline from the Canadiens. To me, it's just the way the calls are made that should not put an equivalence between a hit from behind and a retaliation penalty that's borderline meaningless.
If they call a retaliation penalty, like basically no hit from behind is ever going to result in a power play, because there's never a hit from behind that is not retaliated immediately. You will never have a team, I don't care what team, you will never have a guy hit another guy from behind, head first into the boards, and not have one of his teammates there in a second to address it. It's hockey. That's how hockey's played. That's how hockey's governed. That's how the players maintain order, and that's why fighting exists. Is because of the rising temperature of the game, and it's long been. Gary Bettman loves saying how it regulates the temperature of the game. Well, to those two officials, that wasn't the case. They didn't see it that way. They gave Arbor Jackai a roughing minor. It was so nonsensical. Anyhow, I mean, it's not going to go on and on about this, but they had a rough night. Those guys. Yeah. Sean Monahan slashes a guy's stick in half right in front of one of them. They don't call anything. Columbus gets a call down at the other end 2 seconds later. Like, they just had all sorts of bad moments in that game. but yeah, I don't think
And it's not being pro Canadians. This is just, I would have the same argument, on any game, whoever the teams that are involved. It's just if you are there to make sure that the players are safe,
Mhm.
well, call the game accordingly.
Yeah.
That's it. All
Okay,
right.
so we need theme music for Prospect Friday. We
Oh
also got to
yeah.
come up with a better. Yeah, we need something. We need like a
Okay.
jingle. We got to come up with a jingle. If any of our listeners or viewers out there want to come up with a Prospect Friday jingle, you can send it to us by email, basuandgodin@gmail.com. We'd be happy to test them out. But it is Prospect Friday.
Yes.
Prospect Friday. So the prospect this week, I had a chance to go to the Laval Rocket practice on Tuesday. Just so happened, like I went because the Canadians weren't skating in the morning, and I didn't want to go to the Devils skate, so I decided to go to the Laval Rocket skate, and happened to be there on a day when they were doing development day. So the Canadians' entire development staff was in Laval. They ran the practice, two back-to-back practices, like a 45-minute session, flood the ice, come back out, another 35 minutes. It was long. And it was I wrote about it this week if anyone wants to read about it, but that's not the point of this, is that Joshua Roy was there for that. And, all their other rookies, Riley Kidney, Jaden Struble, all these guys were there. And it was a great window.
So it's not the whole team.
It is the whole team.
Okay.
It was the whole team, but as far as the Canadians are concerned, the importance of it, I'm sure it's important to Mitchell Stevens. I'm sure it's important to Brandon Gignac, but for the Canadians' future, these guys are having that. Specifically, Logan Mailloux, and I think I wrote about this on Tuesday actually. That the fact that Gustav Lindstrom was called up and not Mailloux allowed Mailloux to be there and do that, and they have every intention of having these young guys become overripe or overcook down in Laval. So. Spoke to Joshua Roy afterwards, and I think a lot of people saw his 5-point game, the fact he's leading the AHL in scoring with 11
points in 5 games.
In 5
That's
games,
amazing.
a 5-point game will help that. But more overall, just showing a certain amount of NHL readiness that maybe some of the other rookies, and Jean-François wasn't afraid to say it. He's ahead of guys like Kidney. Specifically Kidney, just because he's physically mature for his age. He just turned 20 in August, but he's physically able to handle the rigors of the American Hockey League, and he feels like defensively he's been as good as he's been offensively. So, or at least definitely not a liability. So it's I saw a lot of fan reaction, like, why isn't he in Montreal? Thought I'd ask the man himself. And he is he couldn't be more on board with being in Laval right now. And he really reminded me of, remember when Max Pacioretty went on Tony Marinaro's show?
Yes.
When he was in Hamilton.
And I'd rather be first line in Hamilton than fourth line in Montreal.
Joshua Roy, same thing. He said, JF has a lot of confidence in me. I'm playing a lot. He's played over 20 minutes in every game he's played. He's out there in important situations, and who's going to use him? And who's to say he'd be doing the same thing in Montreal? So he's in a good place there. We talked to Yoel Armia today after practice about what it's like in Laval. And he came away really impressed with the environment there. He's like, for the American Hockey League, it doesn't get better than that. Place is packed for games. All the equipment, everything is top notch. Like, it does not get better than that for an American Hockey League team. So I think if anyone's concerned that Joshua Roy is sitting in Laval wondering what he has to do to get called up by the Canadians, I can assure you that that's not the case.
Well, I'm sure that if there's a rash of injuries in the Montreal Canadiens lineup, he'll be called up. But otherwise, there's no rush to call him up just yet. Let him dominate down there, and it won't be an indictment of him not being ready or whatever. I think that when he's called up, he'll be the sort of guy that probably won't go down once he's up.
Well, that's what they want. I mean, that's the goal is that when they call him up, that he's up for good.
That's it.
That's it. They don't want to call him up and send him back down and call him up and send him. I mean, we'll mention that specifically. They don't want that. Yeah. They want to make sure that he has enough games under his belt so that when he goes up, he goes up and stays there.
Yeah. So you say we spoke to Armia. Armia said that he liked his tight space plays a little bit like Armia himself is comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
That's one quality that Armia has in spades is being able to make moves and manipulate the puck in tight quarters. Joshua Roy has that too, but he says that he makes a lot of smart plays. And Yasu Lonen, who played with Roy during camp,
Mm-hmm.
said he's an elite talent, and for him, he definitely sees a top six upside for Roy. So, how refreshing would that be for the Montreal Canadiens if, what is it, now we're 13, if not 14 years after Brendan Gallagher was drafted in the fifth round. If a late pick,
Yeah.
blossoms and makes and gives the Canadians, provides the Canadians with a top six forward, because that, as far as I know, it hasn't happened since Gallagher. But a
No,
later
basically.
pick like that,
Yeah.
both guys being
Which
drafted
are
in
hard,
the fifth
and,
round.
and they're generally rare. I mean, it's not that the Canadians are deficient in this category.
No, but
There's not many top six forwards around the NHL that are fifth round picks. I mean,
no, I agree. But
yeah,
at some point you need pleasant surprises. You need to hit
yeah,
a home run with one of your later picks, because that's where it might differentiate you, because you won't always have the top five pick, and it puts even more pressure on your first round picks or your high picks
mm-hmm.
if you never have anything coming out later. Well, Joshua Roy seems to be a very nice surprise. He seems to be also the sort of guy who could eventually complement Nick Suzuki pretty well.
Well, compliment's a good word. I did talk to him about, I found it fascinating how quickly he became joined at the hip with Connor Bedard at the World Juniors. And, I've talked a lot about this notion of complementary players, Raphael Harvey Pinard being a sort of exhibit A of a guy who, and they have, on the coaching staff, they have Alex Burrows, who basically made his whole career being a complementary player, as being the one guy who could really thrive with the Sedins because they were tough to read off of. And so Bedard struck me as a guy that could be difficult to read off of because he's so unpredictable. He's so shifty. He does so many things that are outside the box. And Josh actually admitted, he was like, yeah, sometimes Connor would throw a fake. He'd fake out the other team, but he would fake us out too. And we didn't really know what to expect. But he quickly adapted to him, and he quickly started to understand his patterns and his rhythms and where to go on the ice to be most effective with him. In a short tournament, that's hard. Remember years ago when Hockey Canada couldn't find a line mate for Sidney Crosby until he found Brad Marchand and Patrice Bergeron, because no one could play with him effectively in that short a span of time to build the chemistry required and the knowledge required to play with someone that brilliant. Wasn't easy necessarily for the best players in the world. And so Josh said that's a quality that he's always had, and that all through hockey he's always been able to adapt to his line mates and read their strengths and adapt his game to their strengths so that together they become stronger. And as soon as he said that, I was like, this is the type of guy that Nick Suzuki needs on his wing, and Cole Caulfield. Like eventually, don't freak out, not right away. But honestly, like, I know for a fact the Canadians, as a matter of policy, want their rookies to stay in Laval as long as they can. But if Joshua Roy continues at this pace for 50 games, let's say,
and he dominates the AHL that way.
He dominates the way he is. Maybe not the way he is right now. Not like, he's be on pace for 110 points in 50 games. I don't think he's going to do that. But if he continues to be a point-a-game player or even better than that through 50 games, I think the Canadians at that point would feel comfortable saying, okay, he's done what he has to do in the American Hockey League. Let's get him up. And if that happens, the first stop I would have for Joshua Roy is right wing with Cole Caulfield and Nick Suzuki, assuming they're still playing together at that point. But that just seems, I really want to see what that looks like and see how Joshua Roy would react to that situation.
Well, it's funny you say that because I compared Joshua Roy and Brendan Gallagher based on their draft rankings, but Gallagher spent half a season in Hamilton in the lockout year in 2012, and he played 36 games over there, 20 points in 36 games. was called up once the season started and never looked back. So
Oh, he just made the
yeah,
team out of camp. Yeah, he didn't get
that's
called
it.
up. He made the team out of training
Yeah,
camp.
you're
Yeah,
right.
that's it.
You're right. So I think it doesn't have to be. He doesn't have to wait the whole year necessarily in Laval, but I mean, it's all. It also has to do with it's all great the way that he started, but how will the body react, to the toll of the American League when you're playing, sometimes, well, very often,
Mm-hmm.
a back-to-back games, sometimes three in a row, a lot of bus rides, etc. Just the grind of the AHL schedule. How is he going to react to that? And if he goes through that wall instead of just hitting it, but goes through the wall and keeps going,
Yeah,
I think that's the signal that they're going to get in Montreal that the kid is ready for prime time.
yeah, and I think
So
that's one thing that Hul mentioned as a big concern right now is he had that 5 point game in Laval, and then they left after the game to drive to Belleville. Arrived in Belleville at around 3 in the morning. Played that night in Belleville, and Roy was not the same version of himself. He obviously that took a toll. That was I think it was definitely a back to back, but they had played previously. It was Belleville's a big, tough physical team, as we saw. Buffalo, they have a lot of big prospects that are down there, and so he had a bit more of a difficult game. And so making that second game under those circumstances at the same level as he was the previous night is the one thing that they're really going to work on. I think even Josh recognized that was tough. He
yeah,
said that was really physically difficult, and I'm going to have to learn how to be consistent. I'm going to have to learn to not allow, because he said it himself, there are no excuses. We're professional hockey players now. There's no excuses. Every team has to travel. Every team goes through it. Every player goes through it. I have to be as good as I have to be as good in that game as I was in the game prior. Taking the bus late at night is not an excuse, which is a great attitude to have. He recognizes it, which shows good self-assessment as well. But, I did ask him if he looks at the scoring leaders, and he's like, well, I'm not one to look at them. But if you told me before the season that I'd be leading the league in scoring, I don't think I would have believed you. So he's pretty happy about the offensive output. But yeah, so there are some consistency things that he's going to have to, when the season becomes a grind, he's gonna need to adapt to that. And I think he will.
yeah,
He's got a good head on his shoulders. But it's funny you mentioned Brendan. Speaking of Brendan Gallagher,
yeah.
we did want to finish the show talking about Brendan because he didn't look good first 3 games,
No.
and we were talking about how difficult it is to watch him, wondering if he's going to be able to have a season or what's going to happen with him. Are they going to be able to keep playing him? It was some real dire talk around Brendan Gallagher after the first few games. So I think he deserves mention of how well he's playing now. Take away the late game bad penalties that he's had of late, but he's looking like a very effective player. Not 30-goal Brendan Gallagher, but still an effective player who can help this team.
Well, that's it. I don't think anybody is expecting him to revert to 30 goal season form. To me, it's being, can you hold your own on the top nine
Mm-hmm.
and make sure that you're not just there because your name is Brendan Gallagher, because your play warrants it. And lately it certainly has. And it's funny because at first when Martin St. Louis assembled that line of Monahan, Pearson, and Gallagher, everybody thought, okay, here's the reclamation project line, or the guys that try
Yeah.
to, the resurrection line to a certain extent. Well, it worked. So far, it's working, and
Yeah.
I can see the path of those three guys might end up being very, very different, because I think that Monahan, he's another one who might never go revert back to his highly productive days of Calgary, but I can see him being definitely better or more productive or more impactful than it's
Mm-hmm.
been maybe the past 4 years, let's say, because he has that impact in every facet of the game for the Montreal Canadiens. He's their unsung hero so far. Pearson still have a bit of a hard time reading him. I see his tool, I see his assets. I don't know what's going to.
Really? You have a hard time
How,
reading Pearson?
well, I have a not the player that he is, but projecting him on what is it going to amount to. Let's say 2 years from now,
I find
what
him well.
is
Forget 2 years from now.
trajectory.
All it
It's
has
his
to amount
trajectory.
to.
That's like, go
I
ahead.
understand, but the trajectory only has to last until March 6th or whenever the trade deadline is.
Yeah,
2 years from now is not important to the Montreal Canadiens. As long
that's
as
true
Tanner Pearson can continue playing the way he is now until March, a playoff team will take him.
for sure. Ah, for
Undoubtedly.
sure,
A guy
for
who
sure.
wins wall battles the way he does,
Yeah,
a guy who's always in the right place at the right time, a guy who can shoot it the way he has.
great
I mean,
wrister.
listen, great wrister, heavy release, heavy shot. He's, all three of those guys are doing the redemption story
Yeah,
in their own way. One thing I'd like to see from Gallagher is I don't know how much Marty is still working on him sort of evolving his game. You see it in Josh Anderson a little bit. You see him thinking the game a little differently. You don't see it as much in Brendan Gallagher, and I'm starting to get the impression that maybe Marty was waiting for him to find his game again to start working on him. But like you see, there's certain situations when the puck's on Brendan Gallagher's stick, everyone in the building knows he's going to shoot it as soon as he can, and he does. It invariably gets blocked. There's little aspects of his game that if he wants to continue to be effective into his 30s, that incorporating some of those things that Marty's done with Josh would be good for him. Learning how to look east-west, just increasing his peripheral vision or his range of vision instead of like directly in front of him would be, but it's good to see that some of the old traits of Brendan Gallagher, getting into it with defensemen in front of the opposing net, just being a pain in the ass to play against, and keeping up with the pace of the game, which he wasn't through the first 3 games, really looked painfully slow. He doesn't look like he's not.
no, there seems to be
burner.
another gear.
Yeah.
There's another gear that he found lately that enables him to be following the play a lot more. He had a very effective back check. I think it was against the Devils right after Jack Hughes had made an amazing back check to save a chance on the Canadian side, but
Right.
Gallagher did the same the other way. And yeah, he just has more step in his skates. And the other thing is, and you refer to the fact that he'll mess around with the defenseman and the around the net. Having him back in the kitchen cooking, that's where I want him. The fact that he's a pain in the ass once again, and he's it's his comfort zone. Everybody else talks about it like you pay the price to go in front of the net, the dangerous areas. That's his bread and butter. That's where he feels comfortable, and he goes there, and it's like, yes, I get punched in the face. Yes,
yeah, absolutely, and it does. Totally. It drives him for sure.
But in order to do that, the puck has to be there, and he has to be there, and too infrequently the last couple of years it wasn't the case. When the puck was there, he would arrive a bit late, and now it's synchronizing itself a bit better, and it's encouraging.
I think it also has something to do because when he was kind of looking slow in the first 3 games, I'm like, well, why? You've had an entire training camp. It's not as if like it's why are you not at peak condition right now? You've back-to-back long summers to prepare, and it's starting to dawn on me now that maybe it was just him getting used to his line mates and just the rhythm that they play with.
Yeah,
because of late, and Marty mentioned it prior to the game. I think he was asked about Pearson being an option with Suzuki and Caulfield, and he said he doesn't really want to touch that line right now. He kind of likes that line.
Yeah.
I think they're
interesting when Dvorak comes back.
Yeah, which is what we got 8 days. November 4th is 8 days.
Yeah.
Boy, I'm so excited for that. That's going to be so exciting. I'll be there in St. Louis. It'll be what a momentous day that'll be. So, but yeah, it will be interesting to see because I think that when that happens, then Sean Monahan's going to be with Suzuki and Caulfield. I mean, that's what I think will happen.
Yeah,
in all likelihood. So we'll see what happens when we get to that date. But as of now, that line's going well. Everyone's writing their redemption story, and if it all works out, the Canadians could recoup assets for Pearson, perhaps even Monahan, and everyone will live happily ever after, and except for Brendan Gallagher, who will be actually be pretty well off collecting $6.5 million a year for the next few years. But he will have written somewhat of a redemption story if he can continue like this, and I hope that for him. It was difficult watching him play those first two games, and to think that he's just not able to keep up, and so he's keeping up. So good for him.
Yeah. Next episode Monday we'll open the mailbag. So we invite all of our listeners, whether you listen to us on Apple Podcasts, on Google Podcasts, on Amazon, on Spotify, or you watch us on YouTube. You can send us your questions either on Twitter. We have our handle is Basu and Godin, so BASUANDGODIN, or you can send or just write us an good old email at basuandgodin@gmail.com. So send us your questions, and we'll be happy to answer them during the Monday's mailbag.
Monday we'll be in Vegas, baby, Vegas.
Yes,
we will be recording from Vegas. Both Marc-Antoine and I will be in Las Vegas for the.
We'll see if we'll do it where we'll do it from. Either from our.
Let's do it from Let's do it from outside rooms? The fountains or something. Yeah, we'll go to the Bellagio fountains. Yeah, let's see if they have Wi-Fi there. Yeah. We'll figure out something. We'll figure something out. But yeah, we'll both be in Vegas for Monday's episode, so we will. We'll talk to you then.
Awesome. Have a good weekend, everybody. Bye-bye.